Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see everyone here today. I am Pam Lovelace. I'll be chairing this meeting today for the Transportation Standing Committee. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So we have, I did not receive any regrets, although I do understand that Councillor Outhet is on his way. I would like to ask for any comments or errors or omissions from the approval of the minutes for April 25th. If we have an approver or any issues with the minutes. Second. Moved by Councillor Mason, seconded by Councillor Cleary. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion has carried. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Madam Clerk, over to you.
There are no additions or deletions. However, we do have a request to hear item 10.3.1 before item 8.1.
Colleagues, any issues with that? Excellent. Thank you. So if there are no other changes, may I have a motion, please, to approve order of business? Thank you, Councillor Cuttle, seconded by Councillor Purdy. All in favor? All opposed? Great. We have an order of business. Business arising out of minutes, there are none. Call for declaration of conflict of interest, colleagues. Seeing none, we move to motions of reconsideration, none. Motions of rescission, none. And I'm going to move to 10.3.1. Presentation from Martin Williams before we go to 8.1. So Martin, I'll invite you. Yeah. And Martin, you'll have 10 minutes. And thank you for sending your presentation ahead of time. Appreciate that.
Green is go.
Okay. Green is go? Oh, red is good.
All my friends are over.
Excellent. Okay, over to you, Martin.
Hello, everybody. Everybody's still going strong. Good to see. It was a heavy meeting yesterday. So I'm going to speak for 10 minutes on 2 agenda items. So I'm going to rattle through quite quickly on them because I'm doing the road safety strategy and also a road safety action plan relating to protected movements for pedestrians at signalised intersections. So it's the photo that you are familiar with from using the roads as the issue at hand. So first of all, the road safety strategy, with due respect to the team that worked to develop it, and you've heard from the stakeholders also, that the goal represents a significant shift in our original commitment made in 2018 to reduce all injury and fatal collisions by 20% each 5 years. So to maintain a downward trend in the rate of fatal and serious injury collisions per 100,000 residents, it's a very negligible goal. And it doesn't meet Vision Zero because, of course, if you want to do Vision Zero, you have to have that vision in your goal. So that is the chief, I think, issue that we see with the this overall strategy, which, along with the IMP, we kind of see as guiding documents for all transportation decisions. Is that if you have a very weak goal, it doesn't necessarily produce the results, the Vision Zero result that you want to achieve. I had a look at some other strategies emerging in Canada. There's some extremely good ones emerging, and some, off the back of political campaigns focusing on safety. The City of Windsor have a good summary. Their materials are well worth looking at. And we say infrastructure improvements can be highly effective and are critical components of road safety. Engineering projects can be costly, and the safety improvements are typically localized to the project area. City of Windsor, in contrast, say road safety requires a systems approach. Saving lives is not expensive, meeting the key sort of concepts and requirements of Vision Zero is that we see this paradigm shift from working very cautiously, not interrupting vehicle traffic flow, making sure the status quo is maintained, towards a paradigm shift in our thinking to put road safety, particularly those who are most compromised by it, are put first. So our top priorities in the new road safety strategy, this action plan for top 10 intersections, it says May 2024, but in the estimated annual budget requirements at table 4, we can see that only $25,000 is allocated in the budget year to come, 24-25, before some larger amounts get going in from 25-26 onwards. So we can't expect to see much short-term progress. Expansion of high visibility crosswalks, again, paint is a very sort of negligible solution to a very severe problem. And I've put on this slide some more bigger commitments we made in the previous strategy, including developing an action plan for the worst 10 types of collisions for pedestrians, consider rates, frequencies, consistency of collision patterns, and crosswalk-specific assessments. That was never completed, and that's a very serious omission. So there is some good data from staff, as there always is, some extremely good data, and they've pointed out that although 4% of overall collisions occurred between 2018 2023 to vulnerable road users, so only 4% of collisions involved vulnerable road users, they were involved in 22% of fatal and injury collisions. And staff also point to the fact that 70% overall of vulnerable road user crashes occur at intersections, which is why the focus is on those places. An issue with the stakeholders is that, as you will see from the other plans that are up and running in Canada and our previous plan, is that they involve named road user groups. So if you want safe road users, you have to have as primary stakeholders the groups that represent the road users, as we did in the previous strategy. And the decision to remove them as primary stakeholders is completely inexplicable. The road safety team we hear a lot about, so I don't know if this is envisaged to be the core safety team of staff, the engineering staff. That should obviously include the stakeholders, and you'll see from the City of Windsor Vision Zero plan that the stakeholders, which include road user groups, actually have input into plans, and that commitment is made to involve them in decision making about what to do, rather than just traditionally an engineering team making all the decisions. So in conclusion, the goal is a serious defect, and there are other substantial defects as well. It does raise more questions than it provides answers, and I think it could be abused. It might be that everybody has good intent, but we know that you know, the worst possible case scenario is that we continue to spend mainly on road safety countermeasures that don't actually produce results. They're not evidence-based, as in where they are most needed. My proposal is simply that we have a discussion on whether the Road Safety Framework 2018 is a better document to continue with for now. It was expressly said to be a living document that was mentioned in it. It was expressly drafted to be amended and adapted rather than as something that you look at to religiously pick out this, that, and the other. I think before a far less ambitious strategy is approved, substantive consultation should take place both with road user stakeholder groups, as in meetings, discussions, and also the public, who ultimately have the most to lose from a weak strategy. So I'm now going to try and attempt to do another presentation on the second report, and this is what I understand engages what's in the TPW business plan, an action requirement that traffic management will prepare an implementation plan to regional council for protected left turn movements and protected right turn movements at signalized intersections to enhance vulnerable road user safety. That's on page 21. So this is the unsafe system that we currently live with. We know it's unsafe. We have plenty of data, research, etc. We avoid this question: can seniors, children, and people with disabilities execute this task? Who says they can? We know that they often fail to execute this task, and they represent a disproportionate amount of incident victims. The conflict zones are here. They were actually established in Canada in this municipality by Van Houten in the 1990s by looking at data and observing crosswalks. So we know from our excellent 2023 annual report which provides really fantastic breakdowns, that 50 pedestrians struck by turning movements at signalized intersections in 2020, and overall 52 pedestrians received a non-fatal injury at signalized intersections, significantly higher than other locations. I'm going to skim through this because I'm probably running short of time, but some relevant guidance from the World Health Organization, and following a review of incident data by the BC Coroner's Service Child Death Review in 2016 about separating vehicles from pedestrians in space and time. And ethics, of course, it should be accepted by you all, given the Vision Zero commitment, is that we cannot execute what is known as a trade-off, which is where we decide that we can't possibly delay drivers to provide improved safety for pedestrians, and the impacts of that being not just on injury, but the impact on how we get about, because it's too dangerous for us to walk. And there's plenty of research and studies on this issue about the risks. 30 seconds, okay. So skimming to the end, I would like to point the municipality to the province, who are making very rapid changes at signalized intersections, which are not expensive, based on traffic signal technology and systems changes. And also to Montreal, who are making changes to 300 signalized intersections a year. So I'm sure that we have a lot to learn from others, and we expect to see that in reports, actually examining what other places have done and seeing if we can do it here. And a reminder of the two fatalities that occurred in 2020-21. And to conclude, system-wide adaptations do exist, and we expect to see them in reports rather than focusing on 10 specific intersections at a greater cost.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you so much. I appreciate your presentation today. I do not see any questions, but colleagues, I've just received a note that we do have public participation that would like to actually speak prior to our 8.1 road safety strategy. So if everyone is okay with that, yeah, agreed, thank you. We will move up our public participation. We have two registered speakers. Laura White and Ben Hammer. Ben Hammer. Sorry, is that you? Yes? Okay, I was just, yes, very good. So Ben, what I'm going to do is ask you please to come up and speak. So we'll get to the public participation, and then Laura White ask you to speak as well. Thank you.
Ooh.
Go ahead, Ben. You have the floor. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Ben Hammer, here on behalf of the Ecology Action Center to say good job on the road safety strategy. There's a lot of things we're happy to see, particularly the adoption of Vision Zero, as zero should be the only acceptable number of road fatalities. This new strategy focuses on design as a key consideration of safe streets. One of the things I'd like to see added potentially is, as part of crash response, looking at tactical infrastructure responses to rapid prototype safer designs and considering what built environment factors contributed to collisions. Whew. One of the things I'd like to see is also better data around slip and fall injuries, because not all road injuries involve vehicles. When Stockholm looked at their snow clearing priorities, they found that the data they were using was vehicle collision reports from the police that largely involved men. Whereas when they started looking at medical reports of slip and fall injuries, they found that those affected women more and tended to be around schools, daycares, and other areas. And the census data for HRM also notes that women commute walking at a higher rate. And so as part of improving data management for safer streets, we should also improve data collection for slip and fall injuries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry. Councillor Cuddle has a question for you, Ben.
I keep pushing my button on and off here in my enthusiasm. Just a quick question about the slip and falls. Do you know any cities that do that currently, or any places in Canada? Or you mentioned, I think, Stockholm?
I know Stockholm has. I haven't looked into Canadian examples, but I can if you'd like, but that's also something for a staff report probably.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering if you knew offhand. If you have that information, if you could please send it to me, that would be great. From Stockholm. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Really appreciate you being here today. Laura White, come on up. And you also have 5 minutes. Thank you for being here today.
Okay, go. I didn't know we could have slides. I might have brought you some pretty pictures. But okay, thanks to the chair, the members of the TSC, and to staff. I don't know if there's any staff here, for welcoming here today to talk about the road safety strategy. My perspective is one of a local driver, transit user, cyclist, pedestrian, and a parent of 3. I've also had the privilege of living and traveling to places that provide space for alternative forms of transportation, and I am a candidate in the upcoming election in District 7. So join me today in imagining infrastructure that both keeps us safe and adds joy to our lives. I also, like Ben, see a lot of good things in the document, and I know that everybody working on this is trying to make a difference and improve lives. Just to show our current reality, I'll start with a story. This was all within 3 minutes about a month ago. If you read my email, same story. So I was biking home and crossing over Roby Street coming from the North Common, and at that point I was stopped and saw a car just blow right through the intersection, and a gentleman literally had to jump out of the way to avoid being hit there. And that car didn't have a license plate. Moments later, going through the multi-use path and approaching Quinpool, there was a car on the wrong side of the road coming at a different cyclist, and they literally, to get out of the way, like jumped the median. And then when I was stopped at that crosswalk at Quinpool, there's drivers going right on both sides, just in the way of people trying to cross, and a lot of people trying to cross had limited mobility there. So that was all in 3 minutes. It's not usually that bad that often, but that's what I saw that day. So to jump to the road strategy, I'll just abbreviate what I sent to you in my email on June 7th. First thing is, I think we should track both the absolute numbers of injuries and deaths and the per capita numbers, just that if this is something that happens to someone, it's significant, and I think more respectful to become a statistic in that way, not just per capita. About safe vehicles, I noticed that there's no mention of the size and weight of vehicles on our roads, and I know that's outside of a municipal sphere, but I think we should at least acknowledge it, because it's a big difference if you're both the visibility you have from a big vehicle and the inertia behind you if you're hitting someone. Third, from the safe user section, I think it should be stressed that drivers have the ultimate responsibility because they can inflict the most harm. Fourth, to the safe road section, no mention of trying to reduce the amount of traffic on our roads. So when we have a hazard and we're trying to avoid it, the only way to do that is to remove the hazard or put up barriers. So I really think we need to talk about reducing the amount of cars or trips taken by car if we're going to reduce the hazard. Fifth one, about safe speeds. This is touched on in there, and I just want to reiterate that designing for 30K is what we should have in mind going forward, and eliminating straight stretches on our roads with obstacles like bike storage, parks, bollards, the cycle path curbs, chicanes, strategic parking, and trees. One particular case in point that I've heard from residents when canvassing is Spring Garden between Roby and South Park. That stretch is really wide there, and so it's not a surprise to me that they're getting drag racing and loud sounds. It's attractive for going fast there. Last one is for safe land use planning. In the charter, it states that consistent with the use by the public, the council has full control over the streets in the municipality, and that's exciting to me. I feel like that means we can do whatever we want with that space. We do not have to leave it just to cars like it mostly is now. I think we should focus on moving people in the municipality versus moving vehicles. Cities around the world, such as London, Paris, Montreal, are all quickly changing how they allocate their road space. We need to get on board with this, perform a real transformation of our system in collaboration with the province and their joint regional transportation authority. In closing, I'd like to recommend a book to you that does say Public Library on it. I replaced it for them. It's called Curbing Traffic, The Human Case for Fewer Cars in Our Lives. And it does a really good job of describing why we should do this, written by Canadians Chris and Melissa Bruntlin. They're also online, active on social media if you want little short clips. That's it. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Laura, and I have that book, and I've actually given that book to Todd Vino to read. Yeah, so I have Councillor Outhit on the board to ask you a question here. One moment.
And Laura, thank you for your presentation comments. Have you read the Integrated Mobility Plan?
I have. I just don't see it too much on the streets yet.
Okay, but you're telling us, anyway, I don't want to get into a debate with you, but almost everything you suggested we're actually doing.
Sorry. You've written about doing it. I'm just
no,
not
we are
seeing
doing it, and we've been funding it, but anyway, not quickly enough. But anyway,
I guess so, yeah.
I just wanted you to make sure that you had read that document, and also we need to understand what we can do in the terrible battles we've had when the province won't allow us to reduce speed limits and these sort of things. So anyway, it just sometimes gets me a little frustrated when people come in and think they have these wonderful ideas that we haven't been working on for years.
Is there a question, Councillor?
No, there isn't. There's a clarification that I wanted her to know if she'd read the Integrated Mobility Plan.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. I'm going to ask 3 more times if we have any members of the public who would like to speak today. I believe we have someone here. Go ahead. Go ahead, Matt.
Hello, my name is Matt Stickland, resident of District 2, and I would like to talk to you about the Strategic Road Safety Framework. Although I believe that everyone in this room, staff and elected included, all believe they are doing the best and are trying to do the best, I do believe that the underlying system empowering you is pretty rotten. And the example I want to use here is crosswalks and something we could do very cheaply to prevent people from dying in crosswalks relatively easily, which is putting bollards on car lanes. That's it. Just on car lanes about 1 meter out on either side of the crosswalk, or maybe just the side where the cars are coming from, put a bollard on the car lane. Cars aren't supposed to be on that lane anyway, approaching the crosswalk, so why don't we do it? And I think answering the question, why don't we do it, will expose in great detail the flaws with the system that are preventing us from doing what we all say we want to do in the Strategic Road Safety Framework. So why don't we put bollards in car lanes? Cars might hit it and wreck the car. That's true. Cars might get wrecked, and in exchange, my body will not. Cars are insured by law. Cars can be replaced. Cars can be fixed. As far as I'm aware, except for like 2 times a couple thousand years ago, no one's come back from the dead. What is the trade-off we are making if we are saying not wrecking cars is more important than not wrecking bodies? Now, some people will say, oh, cars might slow down at the crosswalk, even when there's no one in there, when they don't need to. That's true. That would mean we are conditioning drivers to slow down approaching crosswalks. Kind of like when you pick up a gun, you check to make sure that it's not loaded. Every time, if you don't know. If you are approaching a crosswalk, we want people to be slowing down just in case there is a pedestrian there. Why don't we do it? Well, that might slow down traffic. That's true. But what is the trade-off? What is the trade-off? Yes, cars are going to be delayed a couple seconds as they slow down to make sure they're not going through a crosswalk, and in exchange, less people die. Is that a trade-off we want to be making? Yes. Or sorry, no, I don't know, I got lost there. We don't want to be killing people. Yeah, anyway, so, and then another thing that people talk about is snow removal. We don't want to be, gumming up plows. Sure, fair enough. However, it is a lot easier, in my opinion, to engineer solutions to snow removal around narrow sections of street than it is to bring people back to life. So, what can we solve around, and what are we solving around instead? Right, and the other thing with snow removal too, like, we don't test ice thickness anymore. We build infrastructure that we expect to last 25, 50 years. So like, how many more years, honestly, do you expect snow removal to be a line item? How many days of the year do you need snow removal? 15-ish? How many days do you not? 340 some odd? So is it worth it to make driving easier on 15 days of the year as opposed to 340, making it safer for people in crosswalks? I would say, yeah, we want to make it safer more often, right? Like, it's just so, and the reason we don't do this, as far as I am aware, the big one is that traffic would slow down on these sections where the crosswalks were with the bollards, because people wouldn't want to wreck their cars, and that would increase congestion, it would increase travel time. And that's all true. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that if we make it harder to drive, it's not gonna slow down car traffic. It will, it absolutely will. But it will also make it safer. And we cannot make our streets safer unless we are willing to actually build infrastructure that does it. And we're just not willing to do it. And I understand that the political incentives are a little bit messed up because, we built the world around driving. People in your chairs have built the world around driving. It is extremely unpopular until you actually do it, then everyone loves it. But before you do it, everyone is going to hate it. And you need to get elected. So what do? More often than not, the people in your chairs choose to be electable as opposed to doing the right thing. And staff's professional training, they are all about level of service. They threw $2 million with, like, on the Windsor Street Exchange. $2 million is all that's on the hook for increasing level of service. $35 million is for decreasing greenhouse gases and stuff. $2 million is level of service, and that's what was prioritized. So, like, the incentives of the staff are to increase the commute times of car traffic, or decrease the commute times of car traffic, because that's what we've built, and your incentives are not to change it. But you people in your chairs are the only ones who can, and you need to start doing it. Please. Please.
Thank you so much, Matt. We have a question for you. Just hang on. Councillor Cleary.
Just to clarify, so do you mean like a telescopic retractable bollard, or just like one that would be in the lane all the time?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, so just to clarify. So you mean a bollard in the lane all the time?
Yeah, like an actual, not a flex post, like a car will hit it and wreck itself on the car lane.
In the
Yeah.
travel lane?
Yeah, on the painted line, like where cars are not supposed to be. So essentially, you're physically narrowing the lane as it approaches the crosswalk.
Okay. So it would be, okay, so you mean like on the line at the, I'm not a traffic engineer, I'm trying to think.
The white solid line, like essentially, like if there are two lanes, you would have one on either one of the solid white lanes, and then one on the dotted lane in the middle,
Okay,
essentially.
okay, I think I know what you mean now.
It would be a lot easier to draw, but we can
And
keep talking about it.
I'll take issue with your premise. I think the reason we don't install them is because it's never been mentioned before. So that's interesting. I was thinking a retractable telescopic bollard that when you activated the button, it would come up and then the car would have to stop or would hit it. That sounds awesome. But anyway, thank you for that. I think we'll talk later, but I think I'm clear what you mean. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That sounds really cool. Thank you, Matt. I'll ask for a second time if there's anyone here that would like to speak. Come on up to the microphone. Thank you for joining us. Just if you could please give us your if you could just give us her name, you're going to press the button. No, go ahead. Yep, you're going to press the button so that the microphone is red. There you go. And you have 5 minutes.
I
Thank
will
you.
need 30 seconds, I think. My name is Kenna Manis. I live at 6143 Shirley Street. I have not had a car for 15 years. I'm a pensioner. I walk everywhere or take the bus. Overridingly, I would say that although we often say our priorities are transit, pedestrians, and bicycles, you need half an hour's walk around the city to see how badly we fail in accentuating those priorities. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll ask for a third time if there's anyone here that would like to speak. All right, thank you, colleagues, and thank you to the members of the public who joined us today. We're going to move over to 8.1, Road Safety Strategy. Just want to remind everyone that there is a motion on the floor that was placed on the floor on April 25th. Our new Executive Director of Public Works, Lucas Pitts, has a few words to say. Roddy, I think you might have some as well. There is no presentation, colleagues, and I think that's it. Lucas, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And through the Chair, as Council may remember, or Committee may remember, we were asked to take the road safety strategy to the Active Transportation Advisory Council, and we also had another meeting of the External Road Safety Stakeholder Committee. We tried to get everybody as best we could, but there were only a couple people that ended up showing up. I would say the large majority of the criticisms of the road safety strategy are around, especially from ATAC, were around the provincial issues around speed, lowering speed limits in our communities, being able to mail summary offense tickets or photo radar, red light cameras. So a lot of stuff around that, a lot of conversation around road maintenance, which is outside the scope of this per se. From the Road Safety External Steering Committee, of course, we heard the same comments we heard last time about the per capita approach. There was talk about using injury severity scales, which we actually, in the road safety strategy, we are going to do. We're just wrapping our head around the data management piece and how we're going to report out on that. The absence of speed on arterial and major collector roads is priority areas. We heard that message, and you'll notice in the road safety strategy we included speed as a priority. It was initially left out because we are waiting, obviously, on the province to do 90% of that work. Our staff has done an amazing job for our new neighborhoods, getting essentially 40-kilometer-an-hour blanket postings for new developments, but right now it's pretty much the limit of what we can do on the speed front for our arterial and collector roads. There were some comments around of the inclusion, obviously, of same as last time, of having an engagement and education budget and plan. And yeah, I think that more or less summarizes the grand majority of the comments. We did end up incorporating 3 different things. We in the road safety strategy, we added the speed priority. We had the high injury network in there, but I guess that wasn't explained enough, and so that is our attempt to look at our corridors and not just our intersections. Right now, we're not in a place with our data that it's easiest for us to do that, so we added some language around that too, and so we've tried to adapt where we could, and I think we are ready for committee to make their comment and move forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Lucas. Councillor Oathead.
Thank you, Chair. And Lucas, thank you for these comments. Just for clarification, and as I hope you were here the other day when Mark Peachy was here, the Deputy Minister of Transportation. I know Brad was, maybe you weren't. And I actually asked Mark, who's a very nice man, what we could do to have the ability to reduce the speed limit to 40. People talk about 30. Well, we have to go through hell to get 40. And also where we were with the permitting of photo radar and red light cameras, which I think almost overnight would make a huge difference in our city. And I think we've all lived and visited many other cities. And I tell the story about getting a ticket 30 years ago when I lived out west, and still is not legal here. Now, the media interviewed me about this the other day and said the big holdup now with the province was to do with IT challenges. versus regulations and whatnot. I don't know. My question for you, and I've got just a few quick ones here, is where are we moving the needle at all on the photo radar and the red light cameras? Are we moving the needle at all at the default 40? And what about this ability that I thought we had to try at least red light and photo radar as a pilot before they became, there is some kind of pilot legislation that we might be able to use rather than waiting for the TSA to be, the regulations written and implemented. So can you offer us any hope on that? Because the folks who contact us, the folks who are here today, they're not wrong, but they just don't realize, I think, first of all, what isn't within our control. And secondly, I don't know if my colleagues feel this way, but the abuse we take when we do things like bicycling, even my own neighborhood right now, we're finally getting speed calming. I was calling Sam and teasing her about how my own neighbors are mad now that we're doing speed humps, yet they've been complaining to me for 24 years, 7 as a head of the homeowners association and 16 on council, that's 23 years, about speeding in our neighborhood, but they don't want speed humps. Why don't we just do photo radar? Why don't we just reduce the speed limit, which we've done? So can you offer me any kind of update on meaningful progress or any workarounds with the province?
Through the chair, I think I can offer a little bit of hope for sure. We are, so there is pilot guidance within the MVA, and so we have used that approach to work with the province to develop potentially a pilot system. We have identified 3 locations, priority locations, and we have proposed to the province that we be allowed to move forward with that. It's not just the MVA piece that needs to be amended. Of course, it is the Summary Offense Act as well, because right now you can't issue a ticket to a car. You have to issue it to the driver. So there are other pieces there. We have almost bi-monthly meetings, I would say, with the province on this issue, and we as a team are working very hard, and I mean, I don't want to sound hopeful, but I think we're getting a little bit of traction for the pilot piece, but we'll see where it goes for sure. So on the other pieces, and I can't remember.
The default for 40 versus
the default
neighborhood
40.
by neighborhood, sign by sign. Yeah.
I think again, we've gotten a little bit of traction there. I don't know where the TSA is, and I know we keep hearing sort of wait for the TSA, but I think Roddy and his team have done a great job of building really great connections with the province, and so we sort of have a nice flow right now for 40 kilometer hours in our new neighborhoods, which I think is a real step up, but we would have to wait for the TSA, and I'm hearing rumors, all over the place about what's happening with that. So in terms of just blanketing 40, across the older parts of the municipality.
So if West it's not, I still have almost a minute here. If West Bedford, some of the streets off Gary Martin and Broad and whatnot were being built today, we would be building them and signing them to 40? Is that, which I view as good news, and that's the case?
That would probably be the case, yes. With the new changes in the Red Book, we're designing thinner roads, we're putting bump outs in and during construction, and we're putting more curvature in the road, less straight stretches. So
I know, Roddy, you were working on that, and a lot of people were, and was to try and change how we do things. And it just drives me crazy that now I'm getting calls literally all weekend, all night about racing on streets that are less than 5 years old. And they want speed humps on major collectors and, things we can't do. But, all right. Well, listen, I'm going to view that as you gave us some encouraging news, and I have 1 second left, or 5 seconds left, so thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Outhet. And just for the folks watching at home, we do love our acronyms. TSA is the Traffic Safety Act, and Mark Peachy is actually Mark Peck, who's the Executive Director of the Joint Regional Transportation Agency. Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about Mark Peck, the Joint Regional Transportation Agency. Over to you, Councillor Cuddle.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to say thank you for taking the extra time to go and consult with some of our stakeholder groups. I think this is really important for kind of building the relationships, the trust, and also getting some input. So I'm very pleased to hear that, through these consultations, a couple of changes were made, and I think that's very meaningful. So, and an important thing to do, even if changes didn't result, just to make sure that we have those relationships. Councillor Outhit asked my question was about how we're designing streets to be slower. So I think you've answered that, and glad to hear. When that happens, when we design those new streets, if it's a subdivision, is it the developer? Like, are we giving new standards to the developers on how they need to build their streets? Like I'm just trying to figure out where's the connection between the new developments and safer streets. That's one question. The other one was about this whole notion of slip and fall reports, because particularly as it relates to women, as it relates to kids, because it is true. I see every year, I see, who's walking kids to school in the morning. The majority of time, it's women with strollers walking on the road because sidewalks aren't plowed, because we tie our sidewalk priority to our road priority. And I think we really need to flip that on the head and prioritize the pedestrian routes that are most used. And it would be interesting to collect that data if we could. Now, I don't know how we'd do that, because usually if someone slips and falls, they're not calling the police or reporting an accident. It would have to be voluntary. But even if it was voluntary, it might be something useful for us, because we've had difficulty prioritizing the snow clearing on sidewalks and pathways. A great example is the community center, St. Andrews. I was there in the winter, and we had parks come and clear the entryway to the community center, and then we had Public Works clearing the sidewalk, and there's a pathway between the two, and there's a big mound of snow. And you can't cross it if you have a stroller. You can't cross it if you have accessibility issues. And it's not safe to cross, period. So it's not just between our own departments, but also between us and the province, where the province, when it was coming from, the community on the side there that's provincial housing to our community center, no connection. And it just seems like such a simple thing that we have such a great difficulty in making happen, in prioritizing pedestrians. I'll leave it there if you have any comments on those first two questions, if you can remember them. Otherwise, I'll repeat them.
Good afternoon. Roddy McIntyre. I'm Acting Director of Traffic Management. Through you, Madam Chair, to the Councillor, with regard to the first question and the developments. So we work really closely with our colleagues in development engineering and development approvals, and we're passing the information through them, and they also pass the information along to the developers about the new design standards in the Red Book, designing for slower speeds. For the most part, a lot of the developers are very receptive, because the less space they're allocating for the road is the higher the lot yield they tend to get out of a piece of property. So I mean, they tend to be very receptive to things like that. There's a couple that have come online very recently. The Opal Ridge development up at the Penhorn site, that's been pre-approved, designed for 40 kilometers per hour. The Mount Hope subdivision just up the road in Woodside has also got the same approval, because they've been proactive and designed it to meet those requirements. So we take the design information, write up a little letter, send it to my colleagues at the province, and they respond back with the approval to post 40 once they're open. So we've been pretty successful with that. Your second question, I believe, around the slip and fall, that would be more along the lines of us, working with our colleagues in infrastructure maintenance and operations, the Winter Works program. So if there are issues around differences in standards for snow clearing for a street versus a sidewalk and where they are, that would be something that we would have to discuss with those folks. And when there are instances of, like you said, they plowing the snow up into the median, and that kind of blocks the pedestrian access through. So those are complaints that will often come through during winter months, and 9 times out of 10, they end up being fed directly to winter operations, and they can manage that. But if they do happen to come into our office, we just reach out to our colleagues and say, hey, here's an item that's come through, and can that be addressed? So those sort of things are, I believe they're always being looked at as they're highlighted as far as our winter maintenance standards. The slip and fall data, I'm really not sure how we would go about actually collecting that, but that's certainly something to consider moving forward.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that answer, Roddy. Over to Councillor Mason.
Hi, guys. I wanted to first look at all three of you in the eyes and say, I think you do a really good job. I do. And I don't think anybody who works for you gets out of bed in the morning looking to make cars go faster or kill people. I really don't. And I think it's been interesting to see how this has evolved. We have done a lot, and we have a long way to go. I think our policies and the plans are generally pretty good. We have challenges. The TSA that you asked about, Premier Houston said to the media 18 months ago that it's 5 to 7 years away. So maybe it comes faster, but it's sure as heck not coming before the next election. But it is, the reason I wanted to say that to you, that I think you'll do a good job, is I think council sometimes is dealing with a lot of cognitive dissonance when we are literally in a room where the listeners at home may hear the sound of jackhammering happening on Barrington Street, where we are going to narrow that street and widen those sidewalks and make it safer for buses and for pedestrians as part of the Cogswell interchange, where we're going to have separated bike and pedestrian facilities and bus lanes all the way through it. And so that is not enough to make people safe in and of itself. That will be a safer 600 meters than it used to be, for sure. People used to walk along next to the badly designed highway from the 1970s, but now we've got to do all the pieces north, south, east, and west of that. And I say all the time to folks, I wish it could go faster, but when you got $3 billion worth of roads, according to asset management, it's probably going to take us a long time to fix that. And I want to do it as fast as possible, and I want to make sure that we get the best bang for our buck first. No one's asked you about absolute versus per capita, and I don't know if that, to me, that doesn't resonate for me, because if we need, to me, it's the comparators to other cities, and that's the per capita piece that really goes. If someone, if we want to get both like Laura White suggested, I think that would be fine, but it is more work for staff. I'm wondering about, Lucas, if you could talk about the road safety framework for 2018. It was suggested that we could update that and make it a living document and stay with that. What do you see are the improvements over what we have now versus what that was, is my first question. My second question is, I guess for Roddy, is when we passed the Red Book changes that narrowed the roads and made it so our design standards, especially in residential, are approaching what we want from the NACTO guidance and all those things, and I think that's quite good. We talked about coming back to do a second round of changes and tweaks, and I'm wondering if where that is in the work plan, because I think like strengthening that and bringing that back, we had the discussion about the differences between urban and suburban roads and stuff like that, you may recall. I don't expect that's happening next week by any stretch, but when's that coming back so that the public knows? On system-wide versus 10 out of 10, I know, Lucas, you've talked about that those are the 10 you're doing first, but you're going to keep doing it. Do you have any comment on what that would mean to be system-wide? Like I know personally from the problems we've had with the no right turn on red at Jubilee and Oxford that we couldn't do what we want to do, which is to have controlled right and left turns, because the signal was 35, 40 years old and we had to update it. And that's happening hopefully this summer if the property transaction's finally gone through. But do you have any comment on what that might look like versus system-wide, or 10 out of 10, or or 10 intersections at a time, and what your intention is when those are done? And could we make that faster? I, for one, would be okay with slowing down on rolling out speed humps in front of schools and on streets if it meant we got those 10 intersections done faster. Like if we could reallocate that and make that happen faster, I think that would be a decision I'd be willing to talk about. And I guess my last question, and I got to ask it, is what's the difference between a bollard and a pinned curb? Like, what's your preferred way to narrow a street where we already have it done? Like, I know it's expensive to make a street narrower, that there's a lot of engineering and a lot of cost to do that, but I feel like at the intersections of the concrete lozenges, we've been doing that. And I'm wondering, like, what is the preferred methods to narrow streets temporarily? Like, I'm all for, like, when we were trying to do slow streets at the start of COVID, I wanted to fill the reflective barrels full of water, so if you hit them as people were, that you hurt your car, because people weren't respecting them, and that was shot down by legal and risk management, I think. But what are the accepted methods to narrow a street and make it so that the goals that Matt was talking about could be met? Those are my questions, and good work. I'm going to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Through the chair, first one. We do have, as you may remember, we do have the per capita technically as the goal, but we have all the KPIs as well that have mostly absolute numbers in them, and that includes like vulnerable road users, the different types like cyclists and pedestrians. We're going to separate those out as absolute KPIs, and that will be publicly available information on our dashboard. On the improvements between this one and the old one, I think personally, I think this one is vastly more succinct, more data-driven, and more outcome-driven. I think this one really sets out what we're trying to deliver and tracks how we're delivering that and the impacts of those deliveries. If you remember in the first one, we had a lot of, I mean, I can't even count on the number on my fingers how many pilot programs we had, and so it was more of a scattershot approach where we were doing the let's just try everything and see what happens kind of thing, and I think in a lot of ways that first one we were playing catch up, and so we've just installed so many RRFBs over the last 5 years. It's incredible, right? So I think this is a much more succinct, transparent, accountable, and data-driven approach. On the bollard question, you're right. We do that a lot with the tactical. Just up where I live on Thistle, there we have bulged out the roads with our tactical curbs. It's a funny question on the bollard because we put a lot of this stuff in, and we put it on permanently, and we put it in tactically. And I know just in my 2.5 years, I've had calls from counselors about, now people with their trailers can't make the turn. Can you shrink it? Can you cut it? Can you paint it? Can you put a sign up? The sign gets knocked down every 2 months. So there's going to be a lot of that. And so we actually a while back did trial the delineators in the middle of the road for crosswalks, and almost everyone was either knocked down or stolen within a couple months, right? And so there's a balance to be had. Yes, you could put a bollard up, and at night, some car is going to wreck itself, and probably some drivers are going to injure themselves. And there might be a liability piece around that. But most cities I know of are taking a more, London is very big. I mentioned the delineator piece because when I was in London, Ontario, they have delineators in all their crosswalks, and I talked to some of my friends there, and they said they're not having a problem with them disappearing. And we did. So our culture is a little bit different. And so, but they don't have hard bollards. They're knockdown delineators, right? So typically that is the approach, is to put the softer tactical pieces in to account for that. So
system-wide versus 10?
Did you want it? Oh,
Yep.
Sorry, I think there
No,
were
I'm just
5
making sure
questions
all
in
my
there
questions are
in
answered.
total.
Yeah, in the system-wide piece, so yeah, our intent is to do these 10 intersections over the next 2 years, we're starting this year, but capital-wise over the next 2 years. We are going to reiterate that again and do the next 10. After that, if you notice in the report, the number of fatalities and serious injury events at our intersections get really low, 3, 4 over a number of years. And so I don't know if we'll be in a place where we need to iterate again. With our early data piece that we're going to be working on through the next year, we're looking at the high injury network. So we'll start looking at the longer stretches of arterial and collector roads and what can be done there. From a neighborhood perspective, you give a great example. We're going to start looking more at holistic neighborhood plans, and so with the understanding of, when we do put the no right turn on red, everybody just turns right the street before, right? And now those people are now complaining, you have to throw the new right turn red there, and then they just go the street before, right? And so the intent is to take a more holistic approach looking at the neighborhoods. So I think those two pieces together provide more of a systemic piece for us in terms of looking at the entire transportation network and how each individual move that we've made over the last 5 years impacts behaviors and changes behaviors. There's no doubt, and I know there's over and over again. I use the example of the bump outs in the islands, where we put them in and then we're almost immediately asked to take them out. It's the same thing with a lot of the turning movements, is that it goes in and then it creates so many other problems, and it creates honestly much more dangerous situations, because now all of a sudden drivers are very frustrated and they're making very terrible choices. And so we need to take a more holistic, systemic approach, and I think that is what the intent of this is.
Okay, and last question was Red Book review.
Yep, that's right.
Through Madam Chair, the Red Book is, I think, so just to back up a little bit, so the Red Book lives with our design and construction group, and so we work on the book with them. I believe there's a review, and I don't think it's the entire document. I think there's certain sections. They're looking at some updates that I believe are underway now. But again, I don't want to give a timeline and then get myself in trouble with Ann Sherwood. So I mean, but we are looking at some things now, and I'm sure there will be some information coming back as far as what's being looked at for update this round, and it's my understanding that we're looking at potentially being more frequent with updates rather than the big rewrite that we did a number of years ago that took a long time to do. So,
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you so much. Moving over to Vice Chair, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for your work in this and all the other work that you do. So just some questions from some of the correspondence that we received, and also just my own question. Does any city have a zero injury, fatality, collision record? I'm going to give all my questions, and then you can. And if so, what are they doing? Can they maintain that for more than 1 year? And just questions like that. Does any city actually have that zero numerical data? Can we have both metrics shared in the next update of this road strategy? Because in this introduction, you did have the total number of fatalities and injury-related collisions between 2018 and 2023. So that was already provided for us in the introduction. And if the introduction could just, every year that it's put out, have the number of our total population. So just for reference, at the beginning of the document, just to have the total number and what the current population is of the city, because it is going to be increasing every year from what we're anticipating. Also, just on the numbers thing, so in this particular document, it said 4% of overall collisions between 2018 and 23 were vulnerable road users. And of those 4%, 22% were injury and fatal, total injury collisions. I'm just wondering, I would like to know how many people does that equate to? The statistic thing is difficult to understand, for me anyway. I have a hard time equating that with a real number. How many people are we talking about here? I'm wondering, you also talked about a survey that's going to come out in 2024. I was just wondering, what's the ETA on that survey? Has it already come out? Then I didn't know about it. Or wondering if we can get a little flag to know that it's there, so we can send it out on our social media and our newsletters and everything if possible. So one of our correspondents referenced the city of Windsor, highly effective, not costly systems approach. So there was a comparison between our goal, our strategy is to tackle the 10 most dangerous intersections. I was wondering, what is the difference between that and a system-wide approach, To me, those two are two in the same, but our public participation, Mr. Williams seemed to indicate that they're two different things. So I was just wondering if you could explain that from your point of view, what the difference is between those two things. Why were the key non-government groups removed from the stakeholder lists? They weren't included in that stakeholder list.
Do you want to come back and give them some time to answer the questions, Councillor?
But I still have a minute left.
I'm just cognizant of the time, that's all. So they've got some questions.
Yep, I think, go ahead, thank you.
Through the chair to the counselor. So in North America, I am aware of one municipality, Hoboken, New Jersey, which is at Vision Zero. Now, Hoboken, New Jersey is, I think, about 15 blocks of one-way street that is highly dense, and each street is maybe 8 feet wide. So they're cheating, but they have achieved Vision Zero. So, I don't think, some people have mentioned it, but I don't think it's a good comparison for a mix of an urban and rural municipality, such as the HRM, and honestly, most Canadian municipalities, they have an incredibly unfair advantage, and every one of their roads, minus the entrance road, is one way. And they're all very thin, and they have a lot of street parking. So you'd be hard pressed to go over 20 kilometers an hour on 90% of their roads. So, so the per capita versus absolute and intro, we'll take a note of that, and we'll make sure that that's included on the better quality data piece. I don't know, Sam, do you have the total? I know the numbers are in there about how many actual incidences are. Yeah. So it's about 200 per year is what that equates to. And that is buried in the report. But part of what we're trying to do with the public dashboard is those numbers will come forward in an easier to understand way. They won't be buried in a report. They'll be front and center, right? So on the survey, I know, I'll just speak to it. It's our intent. We're still, in the early phases of what that looks like. As I noted at the last meeting, we redirected some of our budget into our engagement piece to cover that off and develop it. We'll be working with comms, obviously, to develop something great, and we're more than happy to share it with the counselors at the time for distribution. So on the system-wide approach, I think Councillor Mason hit it on the head with his example. So, we tend to be like, okay, well, there's injuries at this one intersection, so we put a no right turn and red in, but that creates system-wide complications, because like I said, another good example is the no right turn on red at Joseph Howe and exit 0, where we put that in, and then the lineup got very long, and then there were so many vehicles. I think I mentioned this last time, where I saw the one video, and then one light cycle, 3 different vehicles moved into the left lane, and then at a very high speed zoom down the left lane and turn right. When you wouldn't be able to see anybody on the sidewalk. If there was a child on a bike, you would never be able to see that person over the vehicles queued in the right lane, right? And so a system-wide approach is just that. It's looking at human behavior. It's looking at, okay, if we do this here, what does it mean for the rest of the system?
Okay, I get it now. Yeah.
And lastly, why were the non-governmental, I guess they were removed, I guess is the right word, but the reason was because we created the External Road Safety Stakeholder Committee, and as I mentioned, I think, we were almost up to 20 invitations. We only ended up with 5 people accepting. All 5 groups, I would say, are advocates for the same thing, but the intent was to have a much broader coalition, and we meet twice yearly with that committee, and the intent is to get the on-the-street feedback about what's working, what should be priorities. As part of this, we discussed what, should be in the road safety plan. You've seen the feedback. We don't necessarily agree. I wouldn't even say that we don't necessarily agree. We're just not necessarily going to deliver that piece at this time. But the intent is to seek that feedback and make that it was readily available earlier in our first report, what the feedback from the committee was. And so that was our intent, was actually to get closer to that group and seek feedback from them on a regular basis.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Lucas. Over to Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I love most of what's here. And we've had many discussions about a lot of this stuff. So just to pick up on what a number of stakeholders, and even today, what folks have said, the absolute and relative numbers, I don't know, it's a bit of a red herring. I don't know why people keep going. If you go to our dashboard, it's all absolute numbers. There are no relative numbers. It's the total number of pedestrian collisions, for example. And they're arithmetically linked. You can't have one without the other. So you need the absolute number. You divide it by your population, you get a relative number. And so anyway, I just needed to vent on that one. And the interesting thing is you can't actually know the relative number until about 6 to 12 months after, because we don't get the StatsCan data, and Halifax Partnership doesn't report on what our population is until sometime later. The speed humps, and Councillor Mason said maybe we could prioritize other things, and we'll have a chat about that. We have our 3 E's. We have our education, we have our enforcement, we have our engineering. And what most people don't understand is the province won't let us post a 40-kilometer speed limit until we could demonstrate the speeds around 40 kilometers an hour or less. And so the only way we can achieve that on most of the residential streets is we either have to narrow them like crazy, or put speed humps or speed tables on them so that we can get that speed down so they could approve the 40 kilometers an hour. My hat and whatever other apparel I wear goes off to you, because I remember when TASA was here and we first started this process, and District 9 had the very first neighborhood that was brought down to 40 kilometers an hour in Springvale, Fairmont. It took us 2.5 years to get to that place from the time we said, go ask them and see what they'll do. And they came back the first time and said no. I mean, I can only imagine Roddy and Tasso and everyone pulling out their hair, just how crazy that was as an exercise. We finally got it done, and I don't know what we have now. We've got 24 or more, maybe 30 neighborhoods now, down to 40. But the only way you can actually do that on a lot of those streets is to put a traffic calming device on there and say, now we've measured it's 40, please let us post 40. The turn restrictions are something we need to do more of, but we need support. I'll give you an example. You guys, Roddy, God bless you, for those people who believe in deities. You put that turn restriction on RMV from Quinpool. No word of a lie, that day you put that sign up, got calls thanking me. Wow, I can't believe you guys have finally done this, because they were getting like 3,000 vehicles. The next day, I was getting calls from the same residents saying, all the traffic is still coming down our street. No one's not turning anymore. Like, they're still coming down Armview. And so anyway, I had to put a request into HRP to step up enforcement. So the biggest thing about educating drivers, and that is still happening at Oxford, Oak Allen, where there's the no straight restriction, drivers still do it because you got police officer can't be there all the time. And the frustrating thing, and Councillor Audit and Masons have talked about this, regarding the province and the Traffic Safety Act and all the underlying infrastructure, technology, updating all the fines and making sure that actually everything can come into place so we can ticket people based on the vehicle rather than the driver, because a cop can't be everywhere in a municipality the size of Prince Edward Island all the time. One other thing I will mention is I'm tired of this very uneducated narrative that we don't want to slow down private vehicles. I could care less about the commute time of most private vehicles, but here's what I care about. And we get the KPI report here at this committee on transit. Guess who is in traffic on almost all of our travel lanes, and that's buses. Until we can have dedicated bus lanes and traffic or transit priority measures everywhere, if we slow down a lot of traffic, we're slowing down buses. And buses get slowed down more than any other vehicle because they have to stop and start and they're stuck in traffic. So I just wanted to make that point. Here's a question for you, though. Because when I look at our data from the end of 2018 to end of 2023, just looking at total vehicle pedestrian collisions, we had 193 in 2018, 165 in 2023. So that's an absolute reduction of 14.5%. Relative, based on population, that's like almost a 27%, 26.4% decrease in total vehicle pedestrian collisions. Why aren't injury and fatality collisions going down at the same percentage as total? One would think if you're getting fewer people hit, you would have proportionately fewer injuries, but we're not seeing this. The lines are tracking at different rates. One of our presenters, Laura White, mentioned this earlier about size of vehicles. Is it because for the same speed, just think of your basic high school physics, force, speed times mass, is it because vehicles are getting larger? And when they hit people, there's more force, they're getting injured?
So we're going to ask Lucas Pez to answer that, please. Thank you.
Through the chair, in all honesty, I think that probably plays a portion of the, it provides a portion of the answer, because this is only a 5-year span, and I know that SUVs are growing incredibly more popular, and
Ford F-150 is most popular vehicle.
exactly, right? And so it has escalated, and so yeah. And so I think that's certainly a piece of it for sure. You know, we did some research on other Canadian municipalities, and almost everywhere we looked, the trends are fairly similar. It didn't appear many municipalities hit their goal that they originally set. Pedestrian and vulnerable cyclists, road users is trending up a little bit in terms of the serious injuries and fatalities. You know, I think there's, I mean, I've said this before and it's pure speculation, but I think size of vehicle for sure, but I also think there's like a growing frustration on our roads. I think people are going faster. I think people are more aggressive on our roads. And I think if you sit down one day and just Google Austin or Portland or Copenhagen, it doesn't matter where you look, they're almost all going in the wrong direction. I mean, you look at the states as a whole, and it's gross in the direction they're going, right? And so I think there's a number of co-founding factors there that are impacting the seriousness of the collisions. But certainly vehicle size, as you said, I mean, when it comes to the fatalities and the injuries, it's size and speed, right? So.
Thank you, Lucas. Over to you, Councillor Cuddle. I believe you have an amendment to put on.
I do there, Madam Chair. So, yeah, looking at this here, we have a motion with an amendment. So the motion, just to be clear, the motion was on the floor, it was deferred, and now we're here mostly talking so far about the amendments.
So the amendment is on the screen.
Yeah,
and that's just to approve the road safety strategy as outlined in the supplementary report.
Oh, it's on the screen, not the one that's on the agenda?
Well, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
So the one on the agenda is the motion that was deferred from the April 25th, which was on the floor. When staff took it away, they consulted with the Active Transportation Advisory Committee and provided that feedback and incorporated it into a updated road safety strategy, which is outlined in the supplementary report. So if you're looking to accept those changes, you would need to make an amendment to accept it per the supplementary.
All right, well, I will put that on the floor now then. Okay, I move the motion be amended to approve the road safety strategy as outlined in the supplemental report dated June 5th, 2024.
And that's been seconded by Councillor Elthit. Did I see that? Yes, thank you. Did you have anything else on that, Councillor?
No, I think actually I said my piece about the amendments and the feedback and consulting with the stakeholder groups earlier, so no, I'm good, thank you.
Perfect, and the question has been called. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? And that has carried. So that amendment has carried, so now we have an amended motion. Any discussion on we good? Thank you. Call for the question. Question's been called. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Excellent. So that amended motion has passed. Thank you so much. Great discussion, and thank you to staff for all of your comments and work on this. We are now going to jump to item 9, notice of tabled matters. There are none. Madam Clerk, correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Correspondence has been received.
Yes, correspondence has been received for items 8.1 and 10.3.1. No petitions have been received by the clerk's office.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Do you have any petitions to table? No petitions. We already did item 10.3, presentations, and 11, so we'll jump to 12, information items brought forward from the April 25th meeting. Councillor Purdy, this is the traffic islands on Colby Drive. There is no presentation, but we do have staff available to discuss. So over to you, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, so this is just a continuation from our last discussion on the traffic calming islands on Colby Drive that actually, it's misnamed because they haven't actually calmed traffic at all. They've just created a bit of a headache for not only the residents there with an undue burden that now to get their driveways done or any landscaping that needs big vehicles, now they have to increase the cost of that by paying for traffic control services on top of that. So, and also the removal of on-street parking in front of their houses and such. So since the reason why these were installed, I mean, it's included in the information report, because back then when this was first rolling out, they couldn't put speed humps on transit routes, and they hadn't yet, HRM staff hadn't yet been able or done traffic, not speed humps, but speed tables, which are more softer on the bigger equipment vehicles like our buses and emergency vehicles. So this was a pilot alternative to try, and it didn't actually succeed in the intended use. So I would like to put forward that we go ahead with option B that was offered there in the information report. And the tricky thing here is that the administrative order needs to be amended in order for this to go forward. So there's a couple things that need to be done in order to remove a traffic calming thing on a street, even though this is not traffic calming. One of the things is a petition, and you need 75% approval of the residents in order to move forward with removing it. And the second one is, I would like this included in the 25-26 capital budget if possible. And so one of the other AO stipulations for this would be to wait until the next capitalization project on the street in order to remove. So that will be a long time coming because Colby Drive was just done not what, four years ago or something like that. So it's quite a long time in the future to come. And option B, I also just want to add, is not just a removal of the islands. It's a replacement of the islands with the traffic calming tables that are placed around the whole rest of Colby Drive. So it would just be a continuation of what's already on Colby Drive. So the motion that I have here would be to just address the removal of clause 28B, which would be the stipulation that would have to wait until the next big recapitalization project on Colby Drive, which isn't going to happen for a very, very long time. We will do the petition and get the approval, because I do understand that that would be opening up a can of worms to remove that stipulation from other traffic calming treatments in other places across HRM. So this is the motion.
Are you putting the motion on the floor?
I'm going to do the motion. Oh, yes, yeah.
Sorry, did I just hear a point of order, Councillor Clary?
So there's been no notice of motion, and given that this is an information report, and what the councillor is trying to do is actually amend an administrative order. This was an information report around traffic islands. I'll look to our solicitor, but under our rules, a notice of motion would have to be provided. So you could do that later today at the end of the meeting to bring a motion forward of this significance, because we're not talking about a small thing. This is, you're looking at quite a big thing.
Thank you. I'll ask the solicitor to speak to that, please.
You are correct. There would be a notice of motion required. I think the motion she was going to put on the floor was just a staff report to come back with amendments that would be required of the AO, maybe not to actually amend the AO?
Yes, but same thing.
Yeah.
A notice of motion, I have two notice of motion for later in the meeting. We, generally speaking, for even an information item that's on there, unless you connect with the clerk's office the week before to provide the motion, so that we all have a chance to see what that motion is, notice of motion is required. That's generally our standard rules for staff reports.
Madam Clerk, did you have a comment?
Yeah. The other piece that the committee could do is waive the rules to give notice of motion and request the staff report. It is just to ask for a staff report, and then when it comes back, anything recommending to regional council would still require that notice of motion period to then look at any amendments to the AO.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So at this point in time, I'm hearing that this motion is in order. And we, as it's on your screen, if you wanted to read it. So we're good to proceed. Apologies, Councillor Purdy. Go ahead.
Okay, no apologies needed. I am not great with these procedural things anyway, so that's fine. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to put the motion on the floor for a staff report. That I move that the Transportation Standing Committee requests the Chief Administrative Officer to provide a staff report to consider amendments to Administrative Order 2021-005 OP respecting traffic calming, to remove Clause 28B, to enable the removal of existing traffic calming islands on Colby Drive to be replaced with speed tables as described in Option B of the staff report dated March 12, 2024 in the 2025-26 capital budget. So moved.
Seconded by Councillor Cuddle. Do you have any other comments? Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, yeah, it's just, I really appreciate your support in this. I know that these islands don't work for the intended purpose. It would be great to get the whole Colby Drive with some speed tables to just continue what was already put in place last summer on the rest of the street. And to eliminate this burden from these particular residents, a portion of the whole street that are burdened with this, that no one else in the neighborhood is. And the fact that this pilot project was not repeated elsewhere, just because it didn't work. Yeah, but just asking for a staff report to see how plausible this is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you. I still stand by, I don't think this is in order, but nonetheless, I'm reading through AO1 right now. But on it, so I can't support the motion. It's kind of like hitting a fly with a hammer, because you don't like the speed islands or whatever they're called. And so you want to change the entire administrative order that's going to affect all traffic calming on all streets and throw into disarray, essentially, the process we have, because now if someone gets speed humps and they don't like the speed humps, residents are now going to call us and say, well, you got to remove those speed humps. You don't have to wait. Get rid of them now. And so I think this is dangerous in terms of our process. And also, just to correct you, if you look at the data, table 1, page 2, it indicates the 85th percentile speed on the street was 54 kilometers an hour back in 2017. Since the traffic calming has been in place, if you look at the latest data in 2024, at only one location was there a 2 kilometer an hour increase. The others were negative, -2, -3, -4, or 0. So in fact, it has had a positive traffic calming effect. And if you look at the 85th percentile speeds, they are now either at or near the speed limit. So if we if we look at this on its face, they've actually done the job they were supposed to do. And in 2020, I discount that plus 10 because that was the beginning of COVID when everyone was racing around everywhere on every street because everyone was at home and the streets were wide open for people to speed. And so other than that outlier, all of the rest of them show a decrease, which may or may not be within the margin of error. I don't know what kind of statistical analysis we do on the speed boxes. But nonetheless, your premise is incorrect, that it hasn't had a negative effect. It's slowed down traffic in almost every area. So I can't support that for that reason, and I also can't support changing the administrative order for one street when the administrative order impacts hundreds and hundreds of streets that have been traffic calmed over the last number of years. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. So I'm just going to ask Madam Clerk, please, to provide clarification on, thank you, on the rules of order.
Yeah, so under the rules to suspend, Section 4 of Administrative Order 1, it says notwithstanding, basically certain rules may be suspended by council, committee of the whole, community council, or a standing committee by affirming votes of 2/3. So if you're, because this is a staff report request, but if it is a point of, contention to have notice of motion, you could look at adding to suspend the rules, to waive notice of motion to request the staff report. And then you could certainly subdivide and vote accordingly that way. But to waive or to suspend the rules will require 2/3.
The other option, of course, is to put a notice of motion at the end of the meeting, correct?
The other option would be to withdraw this motion and then, yes, give a notice of motion at the end of this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mason.
Boy. So, if it was a repaving and staff wanted to put in speed humps, I'd be okay with it, Like, doesn't matter to me how we achieve the goal. I think that the way the motion's written is interesting, though, because it's directive to put it in the capital budget. And, you want to put it in the parking lot, in the over-under list, let's do that. And then let's see how next year's council feels about spending $200,000 on it. Because that's a lot of money to end up with the same outcome we have now, except for those people who are impacted by the guy who came and talked about his driveway, right? Like, we're talking about spending $200,000 of taxpayers' money next year for that. And I'm very uncomfortable with that. I also wonder, the reason I was groaning is I had just gotten the administrative order open. So I'll ask Lucas, what does it mean to remove clause 28B? Like, I would rather amend it to say, except Colby Drive this one time. I don't want to open it up that we're going to be going back and forth on every single. I mean, I don't think when it gets to budget, this will be supported by council, that we're going to spend $200,000. But and I also worry about spending staff time and resources on getting the staff report. But I'm kind of leaning, I'm like 45, 55, like let's get the report and see what it does. But I'm wondering, like, what exactly is that amendment? I haven't had a chance to see what's clause 28B mean. If we delete that, what happens?
Over to you, Lucas or Roddy.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the clause 28B is what states that that's the and portion of getting the support to remove. So in order to remove, you need the petition with 75% support. And clause B is the and a capital project needs to be occurring on the street to have the work done. By removing that, so you would still have the requirement to go to the original study area and get the support from the residents. You would just not have to wait for a capital project to go through. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen right away. And you could potentially look at, and I would imagine that's where the report would come in. We could look at options for rewording it that it could happen if approved through the capital budgeting process. It could happen in the next 2 years. It could happen in the next 3 years. It would just remove the requirement to wait for an upcoming capital project in the same area.
Right. So, yeah, I don't like that. Look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cottle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will support this for a staff report to consider the amendments where we can get all kind of the pros and cons of doing this and look at the implications. At this point, we are not actually changing any administrative orders or removing any clauses. So it's really a staff report. I think one of the things that we need to think about is that, being an agile city, you try something, right? And we went ahead and we tried these traffic islands. You prototype, you test, see does it work, doesn't it work? Are there unintended consequences? Is this the model we're going to use going forward? In this case, no, it's not the model that we decided to use going forward. We're using a completely different suite of tools when it comes to traffic calming, because this one has unintended consequences that are directly impacting homeowners on a street, and a small number of homeowners who were kind of subject to this trial of traffic calming that didn't fulfill all of its intended purpose, right? Because it had these unintended consequences. So I think, I don't know if it's something that could be done in the next year's budget. I would look forward to, that discussion and that staff report, but I do think that we need to have the ability to look at things when they're not working and change them if need be, and then from there consider what the budget is, what the timing is, and all the rest of it. So I will support this for staff report.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk, did you have a few comments?
Yeah, so notice of motion is only needed at council when you're amending an administrative order. However, as we noted, if you want it as a procedural motion to add to this motion to waive, that certainly can still be done.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Oathit.
Thank you, Chair. The process of this, and I'm going to probably oversimplify things, be devil's advocate. It's a very out of character for me. So we put in speed calming when professional staff identifies that there's an issue, and they put it in through the budget process, and they determine what kinds of measures, tactics are used. So if we put up a set of traffic lights and they cause problems, you'd probably take them away. If you put in a no turn here sign and it backed up traffic to Truro, you'd probably take it away. So, and when we put the traffic calming in there was no petition, there was no voting. We did away with that when Bruce Swanica was here, and I was one of the people that fought hard for that. I don't think people get to vote or petition on whether we accept illegal activity. Speeding is illegal. You don't get to vote if a policeman comes there to radar. Why do you get to vote if somebody comes there to put speed humps there? And conversely, why would you get to vote if you get to take them out or not, which could condone or increase illegal activity? That makes no sense to me. So I think the order is screwy, to be honest with you. I think that if staff thinks that these aren't effective, then they should have the ability to take them out, the same as they had the ability to put them in, and suggest something better, and to put that into the budget process, where then council decides at some point where, is that something we want to spend the money on or not? But why does council and the public get involved in removing speed calming tactics when they aren't involved in the implementation of them and the putting them in? Can you help me understand that, either of you?
Well,
I said it, maybe I'm oversimplifying, but you don't get to vote on whether you do something about illegal activity. I'm sorry.
yeah, and so, through the chair, we've set it up through the AO, right? And that was an attempt to sort of take exactly what you're talking about out of the process. And, there is a clause in the AO that says that if the engineer deems that it's created an unsafe situation, then they could be augmented or removed.
Right.
In this case, based on that language, this is not an unsafe situation. That is not what it is at all. This is strictly a situation when we're trying to augment based on some, I would call it, economic problems.
I would argue that ineffective is unsafe, but anyway.
Yeah, I would probably argue a little different, but it hasn't created an unsafe situation. And certainly, if we come back with a report, maybe that is some of the language we could consider.
And I'll support the request report for that way, because I just don't know that council and the residents should be involved in that. If you guys, the experts, say this was done wrong, or this could be done better, or this is unsafe, or this is dangerous, or this is ineffective, I think you should have that authority to say, take it out and try this instead.
Through the chair. And, I think the flexibility is there. And in all honesty, we probably would switch that to speed humps on when we had a capital project, I think. I think there's no doubt from staff that, we would probably upgrade in that situation. It's just a question, as Councillor Mason identified, is if the special circumstances would be advancing that and advancing that capital money into another
Understood,
scheduled
and there's a
place,
cost.
right?
But
So-
you know what? Many of us have said around this table, Councillor Cleary, Mason, myself, and others, that and I think probably all of you at one time, we have to try new stuff. There's a cost to trying new stuff, and occasionally the new stuff isn't going to work. And if it doesn't work, there's a cost to that as well as a learning experience. So I don't think there's any shame in this. I think that if it isn't working, let's replace it with something that will work. But I think this may be where Councillor Cleary was heading a little bit. I don't know that, first of all, I'm not even sure 28.5 should be there the way it is, but I don't know that we need to change it sort of for everything. Anyway, we'll see what others have to say, but I suggest, find a way for you guys to have the empowerment to remove stuff that isn't working as well as unsafe.
Thank you, Councillor Othman. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes here to speak to this. So, the unintended consequences of traffic calming, especially in communities and subdivisions that go back, 8, 9, 10 kilometers. We do know that there's a significant issue with emergency services and the delayed response at emergency services, in particular, folks that are coming out of subdivisions in an ambulance, and the concerns of the community in particular with regards to this petition. Having experienced a massive wildfire and evacuation in these, in the community where these subdivisions are multiple kilometers, with many, many speed humps and only a few ways out. There are significant issues with regards to the unintended consequences of traffic calming. Certainly, I will agree that there are benefits to traffic calming, but we've had an evolution of this engineered solution to speeding that, quite frankly, we're seeing inequity throughout the entire region, where some subdivisions just have a little hump, they have a speed table, and others have massive bumps that are, really concerning, especially for emergency services vehicles, ambulances in particular. And so when I look at this motion and consider the complete removal of clause 28B, I do think that there's actually a broader conversation that needs to take place. That, and I do appreciate the issue on Colby Drive, but I also have to note that there are many other neighborhoods that are also experiencing this issue. We lost a home actually to fire not that long ago in Kingswood, and the lack of fire hydrants, lack of pipe water, of course, and the number of speed humps that our fire engines and tankers had to go through up and down the hill to get water fill up and come back up is just unbelievable. So, I do know that the Public Works Department is working with Halifax Regional Fire to look at that review, but I do think, that this may be better served if there was a bit more time spent considering the conversations by providing this committee with notice of motion so that committee members could come forward with more constructive, and thoughtful comments as to the repercussions of the removal of 28B or potentially other amendments to be considered. So that's my comment, but I do think that we would have to consider the 2/3 in order to waive notice, which both our legal, our solicitor and Madam Clerk Krista has provided. So I'm going to hand it over to Councillor Cleary and then jump back to Councillor Purdy to close. Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you. So just a couple of comments. For Councillor Cuddle's point, in quotes, we didn't say it didn't work. In fact, this was not brought by staff to do this. This was based on the motion that the councillor brought forward. Nowhere in the report does staff say we should do this. They just offered 3 options, and here are the price tags of them, and it was an information report, not a recommendation report. So no traffic engineer in the municipality is recommending removing this. Otherwise, it would have come back as a different kind of report. To Councillor Outhitt's point, I agree. We set policy. Just like, so in fact, under the Motor Vehicle Act, we can't approve traffic calming devices anyway. Only the traffic authority can. And so you approve them, they come to our budget, we approve a budget, then you install them. So you approve them, you install them. I don't know why a motion of council will come forward to remove them. The only reason we would do that is if the best professional advice with data collected would say, these are not safe, which you've clearly said that's not the case, and we must remove them. And the administrative order actually has that in there, section 27, says if the traffic authority or engineer doesn't feel they're safe in their opinion, they can remove them. So, and I believe this section with the voting actually is a vestige from when you did have to vote to bring them in the first place, and we probably should have removed that so that it was kind of like we took out the early voting, but we forgot to take out the later voting. So anyway, I cannot support this procedurally, and I just got to go back to this. I hate to be a pedant, but Section 50 of Administrative Order 1 says the following motions may be introduced without notice, and it's a motion to adjourn, to call for a question, to refer, to table, to defer, to amend, to suspend rules of procedure, to move to adjourn council, go to committee of the whole, to a motion arising from a presentation. This is not a presentation, and a motion to convene in camera and any other procedural motion. This is not any one of those motions that Section 50 says you can bring without notice. So anyway, I just put that forward. It's really important that our lawyer and our clerk know what our rules are. The last thing I'll mention is our chair's point. If you're traveling 8 kilometers at 40 kilometers an hour, it takes about 12 minutes to travel that distance. It's like 11 to go at, or 50. So there's actually not a huge difference in speed if traveling 8 kilometers an hour at 40 or 50 in terms of getting to anywhere. Anyway, I just wanted to make all those points. So I can't vote for this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Purdy, you're going to close.
Thank you. So actually, a couple things. So according to that same graph there, through this information report, it is stated the data showed that the installation of the median islands did not result in the desired reduction in vehicle speed. Based on the data presented in Table 1, apart from Location 10, installation of the median islands does not appear to be providing the desired reduction in vehicle operating speed. So no, they don't work. And yes, they are unsafe. We have had 4 vehicles that I know of flip because the tires have clipped the median and ended up on people's front lawns. So these people are not always reporting this to the RCMP, and there may be more vehicles, and we will find that out when we go door to door with the petition to know how many front lawns have had a vehicle end up on their front lawn because their tires have clipped the islands. So yes, this does happen. These have only been installed in the last 5 years, and we've had at least 4 vehicles that I know of flip and get up onto a front lawn. So they are unsafe. Secondly, it's not going to cost $200,000 because $100,000 of that is actually just installing traffic calming that's already been installed. It would have been installed or could have with what happened last year on the street. So it's not $200,000. $100,000 of that is actually just putting in the traffic calming tables that are already around the whole rest of the street. So only half of that amount would be to remove the islands. And is it possible to amend the AO section 28B to say, except for Colby Drive in this one instance that what Councillor Mason said? Like, is that possible? Because I was told you can't suspend the AO for any particular project. Like, but what are the options here? It seems like our hands are tied to do anything with these islands. And as for notice of motion, I am happy to withdraw this and provide a notice of motion for the next time we come together, just maybe we can.
Thank you, Councillor. So do I have the seconder on that withdrawal, please? Thank you, Councillor Cottle. So that motion has been withdrawn. Okay, thank you. Councillor Outhet.
Thank you, and the motion's withdrawn, but I'm still going to ask my...
Sorry, there's no motion on the floor anymore. So we're...
Okay, so the motion has been withdrawn.
Yeah, debate has concluded.
Well, so... Okay, but I wanted a question for staff on this. Can I still do that?
There is no motion on the floor, Councillor, so you can ask that question at the next meeting when that motion comes forward.
Yeah,
Okay. So we're going to move on because it is already 3:15, and I have just missed attending my Heritage Advisory Committee, which is extremely disappointing. Scheduling, eh? Okay, folks, we're going to move to 13.1, Road Safety Action Plans. Who would like to take that? I don't believe we have a presentation on that, but Samantha is here to speak to it. Councillor Cleary.
Happy to put that on the floor, that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council approve the proposed action plans in principle to address the 10 intersections with the highest number of fatal injury collisions as outlined in the staff report dated June 14, 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Seconded by Councillor Outhet.
And so, obviously, having a number, unfortunately, of these intersections, too many of these intersections in my district, I desperately want to see this moving forward. And one of the things that I think is really important, when we look at problem intersections, because, and this has sort of been tangentially mentioned before, we're a relatively small population, and so we have relatively little traffic, again, relatively, on some of our streets. So we could see ebbs and flows in the number of collisions and that sort of thing happening. I'm glad to see that this covers a 5-year period. So we're aggregating the data and saying, okay, over this entire period, because if it's a problem 1 year, you may be reactive and say, oh, well, let's do something about it. And then the next year, there's no problems there. But if, you know, just some of the ones in my district, Bears Road in Connaught, Joe Howe, Dutch Village, Mumford Road at the Halifax Shopping Centre, Joe Howe and Dutch Village again on the other side, Chebucto and Connaught. These are in or on the edge of my district, 4 of them, unfortunately. And some of them have real issues, and they're perennial issues. But is there a way, because we can get this data from police reports and from calls that residents actually give us. The problem is we do, and this is related to this, but maybe not at the same intersections, and maybe it is the same intersections. is there a way through cameras or other types of technology to monitor intersections for the near collisions or near what people call near misses, which is such a weird term, for seeing where there is a high risk? Maybe they don't result in collisions all the time, but they seem to present a high risk, and maybe it's because of the type of user at the intersection. Maybe they're younger, more agile, because we know that younger people and older people are more vulnerable. And actually, if you look at the data around injuries and fatalities, especially fatalities, almost all of our pedestrian fatalities in the last, going back 8 years now, are seniors over the age of 55. And so when we're looking at this, I love this, I want to move forward with this, but just my question is to you, is there a way to monitor intersections for the almost collisions?
Through the chair to the councillor, we actually have an annual program where we video certain intersections and we study them for near misses.
How do you choose those?
Often it's a number of these ones have the near miss analysis done, so it is in areas where we've identified there might be a concern and maybe it's not showing up in the accidents like you said, and it's showing up in other ways, and so we do move it around every year, but we do have that data and we do use that data to make decisions.
What technology are you using for that?
Pass that one to Roddy.
Through Madam Chair to the councillor, so there's a couple of different platforms that have been used in the past. I believe the most recent one we use now is just from a vendor called Transoft. And basically you collect the video and they run it through their platform, and what it does is, and I'm going to very oversimplify this, it essentially draws a virtual box around a vehicle and a pedestrian. It recognizes and tracks as they go through the intersection, and then it'll actually flag when they come within a certain distance of each other and within a certain time. So it doesn't mean, yes, a vehicle has to be, half a meter away from a pedestrian. It would be, well, based on the trajectory of this vehicle and the trajectory of this pedestrian, that there's the potential for that proximity and that near miss to happen.
And how does that, I have only 30 seconds left, how does that come back to us if it does at all? Because I've never seen a report that focused on like the worst intersections of almost collisions.
Through you, Madam Chair to the councillor, at this point we haven't actually come back with that information. Okay. We use it to help us formulate kind of where we're going to go and make improvements.
And to the best of your knowledge, do these top 10 also correlate with the top, I don't know how many, but just are there problems with near collisions here as well?
For the most part, there would be problems like that as well.
Awesome. Okay,
yep.
Thank you.
Yep. We use whatever tools we can find to help us make our decisions.
Thank you so much. Great discussion. I don't see anyone else on the board, so question's been called. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion has carried. Thank you to staff. Great discussion today. There are no motions, no in camera, no added items. Notices of motions, colleagues. Oh, notices of I saw a hand over here. Councillor Clary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Take notice that at a future meeting of the Transportation Standing Committee, I intend to move that the Transportation Standing Committee direct the Chief Administrative Officer to prepare a staff report that examines revisions to residential parking permits that would charge differential fees based on length or weight of the vehicle, with higher fees for longer vehicles. And I have a second one. Take notice that at a future meeting of the Transportation Standing Committee, I intend to move that that the Transportation Standing Committee direct the Chief Administrative Officer to prepare a staff report looking at adjustments to signs and signals that would truly prioritize pedestrians on streets that are designated as pedestrian-oriented main streets in our land use planning documents.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So take notice that at a future meeting of the Transportation Standing Committee, I intend to move a motion to request the Chief Administrative Officer to provide a staff report to consider amendments to Administrative Order 2021-005 OP respecting traffic calming to remove Clause 28B to enable the removal of existing traffic calming islands on Colby Drive to be replaced with speed tables as described in Option B of the staff report dated March 12, 2024, in the 2025-2026 capital budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. No other notices of motion. Date of our next meeting is July 25th, 2024. Ask for an adjournment. Thank you, Counselor Cleary. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. Really appreciate the discussion. Have a wonderful sunny day, and make sure you drink lots of water.